Okay. Hello. Can you give me a test real quick, Jason?
Yeah. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3.
Thank
Sound
you.
check. Good?
I think we're good. Everybody who's on and has been waiting, thank you all for doing that. Can somebody give me a thumbs up if everything sounds good on y'all's end too, just in the chat if you don't mind? I'm gonna go with it. It's
Okay. I'm not going to load up YouTube at the same time to look because sometimes that messes up with bandwidth for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and I'd like to thank Jason for doing a quick turnaround pop-up Q&A. I'll give a quick little kind of what brought us to this. The first time I knew of Basecamp or 37 Signals at the time was in 2003. I was starting a web design company with a friend of mine, and he showed up. He brought the 37 Signals website to me. I was like, this is a really cool thing. We should try to kind of see what they're doing and see how we could do things similar. And the thing that really caught my eye about 37 Signals was the Signal versus Noise blog, which was old school company blogging at its best, and something I really loved and enjoyed. What was really interesting to me about that was, and stayed throughout, is that Jason and David and everybody at 37 Signals is not afraid to take a opinion, stick to it, and make the argument for it no matter what it is or how it is done. The ones that it kind of, when you do that, things get stuck. So like there's a couple of things that I always remember that get stuck in my mind, and one of them was, we don't hire people that don't use Apple computers. Do you still not hire people that don't use Apple computers, Jason?
No, you can use whatever computer you want. In fact, we have some new problems with Apple, but
yeah, no.
That said, most people still use Macs here, and in fact, with the new chips they're coming out with, the M1 and whatnot, it's even more attractive than ever before. So, but yeah, no restrictions there.
That was, I think about that. Do you guys, you were, the Signal versus Noise blog was a prolific blog where you guys were doing a lot of writing regularly. And like I said, one of the things that always drove me crazy was like, how did they get so many comments? They would like post something, you'd have 50, 100 comments. Everybody's like, oh, this is awesome, great job. Or sometimes they'll be picking a fight. But the kind of company blog is no longer a thing when it comes to marketing. And you guys write some still on there, but not as much. And it's more turned into like maybe personal Twitters or personal streams of content. Do you know when that happened for you guys and why that happened for you? Or is it just the...
Why we stopped doing sort of more of a company blog?
Yeah, like what?
Yeah.
Where did you see an inflection point where you're like, this is not worth our time anymore? And like,
not really. I think it's, for us, things just kind of happen naturally. I don't mean like success happens naturally. I just mean like, we don't really think too much about things like that. So if we just stop writing somewhere, it's because we're just not, either don't have anything new to say or are writing somewhere else. So I think a lot of our sort of businessy points of view either ended up in books, which started out often as SVN posts, but mostly these days on Twitter. I think that writing Twitter and Twitter threads is a little bit more to the point for some of these things. And actually our audience is quite large there. So like I've got, I don't know, somewhere a little bit under 300,000 followers, and David has 400 and something thousand followers. So for us, if we can reach, 600,000-700,000 people by tweeting, we're going to reach way more that way than we are going to reach on our blog. That said, there's oftentimes we have extended thoughts that we want to share in a full-blown write-up, and we will use SVN or something else for that, or Signal versus Noise. When I say SVN, that's what that means for that. In fact, we're actually working on something that might replace Signal versus Noise right now. So I can't say much more about that. But basically the point is that it's wherever we feel like we can communicate best. And sometimes short spurts like Twitter and threads and being able to interact directly is just a better fit. Other times we want to really expound on something or expand on something, and so we go for a full-blown post.
Yeah. On the marketing front, that was kind of why I originally reached out to you as well. And the idea was have, and David has written kind of extensively on SVN when you're still ready to post, kind of around the idea of making choices around how and when you track users for marketing purposes, and even with the new product with Hey, it's very clear that it says, hey, we blocked so and so when you get an email from someone saying that they're trying to track you as well, and we did our best to block it. How have you found marketing working for you now when there's maybe a limitation around tracking that you have put on yourself? Is that the case, or what is your experience with that then?
Yeah, so we don't track anything, basically. We've turned off trackers everywhere. We keep track of traffic in the aggregate, but we don't look at something and go, how'd this perform? It's just not something we do. We used to track all sorts of things like everyone else does, sort of like by default. That's just like what you do because the tech exists. And let's just track this, track that, and watch these numbers. And at the end of the day, it wasn't interesting to us. It just wasn't fun. Like we weren't going to change our behavior if this did well or this did poorly. Like we don't do things based on that. We do things based on what we want to do and let the chips fall where they may. So for us, it's not about what performs. It's like, how, did I enjoy doing that? Was that fun? Was it worth it? In that regard, obviously you can't just do things that don't work forever. But as long as you do a few things that work and you enjoy all the things, even if some of them don't work, then for us at least it's panned out. And that's kind of how we look at that. Further, we're just pretty much against targeted advertising, targeted anything. And so we're trying to like live our words and walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So that's kind of why we've done that. And then with Hey, we kind of, people don't realize this, but the simple act of opening an email can reveal all sorts of information about you to the sender that they don't tell you about, that you don't know about. And that seems like a privacy violation. So we're trying to protect people. So when you open an email with Hey, if there's a tracking pixel in that email, the sender is not going to get to know your IP address. They're not going to get to know when you opened it and how often you opened it, and what kind of computer you have, or what kind of phone you have, or how many times you look back at it, or how long you spent reading it. They don't deserve that information. There's nothing about it that says you should have this information about me. So we're putting the power back in the hands of the recipient rather than the sender, which is where it's traditionally been.
I wrote this down, and it seems like a good follow-up, but at the same time, I'm not trying to call anybody out. Do you think Monday.com spends more on retargeting than you do on marketing at all at Basecamp?
I'm pretty sure. I mean, yeah, they are all over us and everyone else, and that's fun. Whatever, they have a massive budget, I'm sure, and they're probably hemorrhaging money because of it. Whatever. We don't have a marketing budget, actually. We experiment with things here and there. Last year, we spent a lot of money trying to buy ads and sponsor podcasts and sponsor events. And we found after reviewing it at the end of the year, that it just wasn't interesting. It was just kind of boring. There were some things we did that we supported Creative Mornings, which we really like. We supported some conferences, tiny conference. There's some other conferences we supported and whatnot that we microconf, sorry, that we like, and that feels good. But as far as a marketing exploration, it just like doesn't really pan out if you're going to measure those things in the traditional sense. Right. So we decided that this year we're not doing hardly any of that stuff. We might sponsor a few things again just to support something, but we wouldn't look at it in terms of marketing. It's more of support. And then we're going to do other things like experiments, like we just did with the dumpster fire. I don't know if you saw that, right? Yeah. Like that's fun for us. We're just going to do things like that and see what happens. Just like we've done everything else, and we've just done it because we felt like we should try it and see what happens. And again, hit enough of those and you're okay.
Yeah, I mean, that was, the dumpster fire thing reminded me of kind of, and excuse me if I get a little sentimental, because it reminds me of the old school internet when the internet was fun before it was a dumpster fire.
Right.
And, it was you and Kudal and even Threadless. There was like the Chicago mafia of folks that were kind of in that space doing like interesting things online. And it just doesn't seem like that kind of content is out there as much anymore. Do you think that has something to do with once you start putting numbers to everything and tracking, some of that stuff doesn't return like it should, or what happened to like some of the creativity that those things have happened?
I think that in the early days of anything, nobody knows anything, and people are trying to find the limits, and so they just explore. It's like, going west when there was just empty territory. I mean, of course, it was Native American lands, but I don't know what's out there. Let's go find out, right? And so you just kind of go and you explore, or people, hundreds of years ago, they would explore the oceans and find things, find new islands and uninhabited spaces. Like, you just kind of explore and you try, and you don't know what you're getting yourself into. So you just kind of try to, there's no limits in a sense. There in many ways are still no limits on the internet, but there are these sort of implicit limits that it's now a place for business. It's not a place for, there's still plenty of fun, by the way. I mean, like, one of my favorite new things is, let me see if I'm getting the URL right, just so I don't say the wrong, tree.fm, where you can listen to a forest. People can upload recordings of forest sounds all over the world, and you can listen to a forest. So, like, I've been listening to forest sounds during the day while I'm working, and it's a lovely thing. And that's an internet-only kind of thing. I mean, kind of, and
right.
and I dig that. I guess there's other ways you could do it, but it's a website and it's kind of fun. So there's still plenty of fun out there, but it's not the same as before. It was a playground. Now it's like a business park. it's like well manicured and to a certain degree and official, and you kind of stay off the grass. Before it was just like, go have fun. And we're trying to bring a little bit of that back. I mean, of course, our own little tiny corner of the internet is minuscule, but we like the spirit of the early days. We're from the early days, and so it'd be fun to bring some of that back. So that's kind of the idea. Like, the dumpster fire was something you would have expected to see 15 years ago, maybe, or 20 years ago, like someone doing some wild experiment that made no sense, but was kind of fun to do. And that's sort of what we're trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's exciting to imagine the idea of what happens when everything doesn't have a metric behind it. I mean,
that's a big part of it. If I could just speak to that, that's a huge part of it, because I understand, ultimately things have to pay off, but when it's only payoff is only measured in terms of return, it can dull a lot of things, and it can get kind of boring, and then it takes all the fun out of everything. Everything becomes really serious, and you do something great, and it's like, well, but how did it work? Did it perform? It's like, maybe the performance was the thing itself, and that was sort of enough, and maybe not. I don't know. And I get that there's budgets and people have to defend their jobs, and companies want to grow, and they need to make sure they're spending their money in the right ways. But when everything is measured, it just makes it boring. It takes all the fun out of it, unless, of course, it's a massive hit. But that's not very common. Most things are not massive hits. Most things are tiny little incremental improvements. And you can put a lot of work into something and find out it only, moved the needle 0.2%. And it was fun until you found out it only moved at 0.2%. And then it's like, it wasn't worth it. It's like, that's kind of a crappy way to go through your days, to find out all the work you put into something wasn't worth it all the time. It's just not that interesting. Again, I understand why people have to justify things, but I just think there's other ways to justify things too.
But, and that is kind of to another point of yours, which is, the lack of outside funding. I mean, I think you took some money from Bezos a long time ago, but has that been the only outside funding you guys have taken? Or?
Yeah, 2006, the thing is, that wasn't even funding for the business. So that money was, Jeff Bezos bought a slice of the business from David and I. And so that money went to David and I, didn't go into the business. And we sold Jeff some of our own personal shares. So we've never taken an outside penny to run the business, and never will. So that's part of that is one of the reasons why we can do the things that we do, right, because we're fully independent. And it's interesting. People take money and it thinks it gives them, and they think it gives them options. And it does, but it closes probably a lot more doors, actually, in a lot of ways. All of a sudden, things get serious. You got to spend all that money. It's not like money you can just play with. You got to spend it and justify it. And of course, you have to spend it until you have none left, so you can get more of it, and you become more and more dependent on it. And we, for example, the dumpster fire and some other things we've done would be impossible to justify, especially when there'd be a return required on it, like a very monetary, measurable return. We just wouldn't be able to get there. And so we would have shut that down and we wouldn't have done more. But instead, we just had really a lot of fun and said, hey, this is fun. Let's try this for a while and see how it goes. And we're not making a commitment forever. let's do one at a time and see how it continues to go. And one might be better than the other, and we'll do another one and see how it goes, and we'll see how it feels. And at some point, if it doesn't feel good anymore, we won't do it. Or if it continues to feel good, we'll keep doing it, or we'll feel something else and do that instead, and just kind of continue to find our way in the darkness, basically, not knowing exactly what's going to work, but knowing what drives us and makes us feel like we're enjoying ourselves at work.
I know you've been a big proponent of the bootstrap people, and there's a lot of content actually that you guys created around that a while back. Do you think do you have a sense of why the outside investment becomes such a important metric for a lot of people? I mean, we're at the ATDC. A lot of our companies do raise a lot of money, and that's a good thing in a lot of ways. But I do think that, like, is there a number that you need to hit as a company where you're like, why are you taking money? Why is this a thing that is going there? Have you guys thought about, like, if we can hit this number, we'll never have to ask for VC money again, or whatever it might be? Has there been any math put into it?
No, for us, we want to be profitable every year, like literally, truly profitable, not like fancy math profitable, but make more money than we spend after all expenses, not EBITDA, but like everything. After all of our expenses, is there money left over that is profit? And as long as we're doing that, even if it's $1 a year, that means we've covered everything we wanted to do, and we can do it again next year. Like, that's the thing. If you keep losing money, then you either need outside money or you need to change what you're doing. So our aim is simply just to make more than we spend, all in, and that's it. So it's not a matter of like, what does that number have to be? We just want it to be positive, basically.
And software, so you guys were a service company for years, and then turned over to Basecamp into a fully software company. What was that kind of inflection point? When did you say we're going all in, and what was the kind of decision behind why you went all in on the software side of things over the
Yeah, it was, again, a natural thing that just sort of began to happen. So we got really busy with our web design company back in the early 2000s. We were doing a lot of projects, and we couldn't really manage them very well. Things were dropping, we were dropping things were slipping through the cracks. I didn't know what someone else was doing. Someone else didn't know what I was doing. We didn't have any client feedback in a central place. So I didn't know they said that. No one showed me that email or told me that on the phone, like, just scattered. And so we felt like we had to build something that would work for us, and we did. And we started using it with our clients, very, very rudimentary version of it. And they liked it, and we liked it. And we said, hey, maybe there's a product here. Maybe other people could use this too. I mean, there's a lot of web design firms at the time, obviously, and design agencies and consulting firms and all that stuff. They all work with clients. Like, maybe there's something here. So we finished it up. We called it Basecamp. We put it on the market February 4th or 5th, 2004. And which, by the way, is the same exact day Facebook launched. We just put out there, put some prices on it. And it turned out about a year and a half or something like that later. I think it was, somewhere between a year and a half. It was making more money for us than our web design company was making for us. So we said, like, this is more fun. Again, getting back to, like, what do we want to do with our time? It's more fun to do the software thing, and we're making more money from it, and the margins are higher, and we don't have to go out and find new clients every 3 months. Like, this is where we want to be. So we started doing that more. And then at some point, I don't know when it was, we had some client projects still running for a while, but then we eventually phased it out, and we've been exclusively software for 15, 16 years now at this point.
Yeah. The 37 Signals turned into full-on software company was something that launched 1,000 agencies trying to become a software company as well. So I don't know if I should thank you for that or damn you for that, but there was some inspiration to it for sure. But it also makes it, it's not as easy as that for everybody else. I will say that there's a lot of people that I've worked with, that getting off of the service side of things is a very difficult trick to figure out. Especially if you're getting paid a couple $100s an hour for services.
Sure.
To find that focus and to find that time to build on while you don't have that can be difficult. Was there any specific trick to the focus that allowed you to do that, while still, making money, in the service side of things?
I'm not totally sure I get that one. Can you just rephrase
Yeah,
it a
can you,
little bit?
if,
Yeah.
how are you able to separate and be able to spend time on something that made no money at first,
Yeah.
while still working client projects throughout the day as
Yeah.
well? Was it just
It
hard
was-
work, or was it?
Well, the key was that we didn't drop everything to do software. So we began as a web design firm, and we still did client work even while we were building Basecamp. We treated Basecamp like a client, like it was 20% of our time, basically, And so we were able to sort of feather it in, meaning like it was a gradient of time spent. So in the early days, it was 20% of our time, or whatever, not exactly, whatever it was. We had other client work going on. So the client work was paying for Basecamp development. Just like sometimes a big client might sort of subsidize a small client and whatever it might be. And then over time, once we launched Basecamp and it started making more money, it took up more and more of our time. So now we could spend 35% of our time or 40% of our time on it and still have to get some client work in because Basecamp wasn't sustainable yet.
Right.
But we just kind of kept shifting. And at some point, Basecamp became the main breadwinner and enough to support. There's just 4 of us in the early days. So like, it didn't take that many people it didn't take that much to support a few salaries,
Right.
And in those days, designers weren't making 6 figures. It was just a lot, it was easier to afford a few great people back then too. It was different. Times were different. So it worked, it worked, and then eventually it became the primary thing, and then we phased out the client work to 0, and that was that.
So treat it like a client is a good first step on that, at least. And yeah.
Treat it like a client. Yeah, treat it like a client, and you have to give it some. So in the early days, it may not pay. It's not going to pay off, which is why you only give it a little bit of time. And then as you gain some confidence, you might be able to spend some of your confidence on it, even though it's not paying you back yet, because you go, I know this is going to go. So I feel good about where this is headed, but I don't want to spend so much time on it that I neglect what's actually paying the bills.
Right.
So you really got to still get the work and get, if you're going to switch from a service firm to a software firm, got to keep doing the service work to support the R&D essentially on the software side. But at some point it becomes clear that there's something there and you go for it. But I think the big thing for me is more of a mentality, which is I'm very comfortable taking risks. I'm not comfortable putting myself at risk. So we weren't going to drop all client work to go all in on Basecamp. That would have been dangerous and risky and existentially risky because Basecamp may not have worked out. I don't want to put myself in that position where I'm scared or nervous or in trouble or regretful. So I'd rather just take the risk, but make it measured that if Basecamp didn't work out, we could still do client work. It'd be fine.
Was Basecamp the first chop at the tree of that, as far as the first product you guys tried to bring to the world, or was there something before that was like we stopped early?
It was, well, personally, I'd done some stuff before. So I built software before. I built software with Basecamp. So I got my career started making, career is the wrong way. I just got started as an enthusiast making music collection software. I had a big music collection. I wanted to keep track of, back in the day, what CDs and tapes I had and who I was loaning them out to, because I'd loan them out to friends and never get them back, and I forgot who I gave them to. And so I made some stuff like that and got started with that. And then I actually met David because I was trying to build a web-based version of a book organizing tool. The software as a service tool. This is really early in the early 2000s, before this is really even a thing. And I was learning PHP, and I sort of got 70% of the way there or something like that. And then I just got totally stumped and I couldn't figure it out. And then I met David online, and David suggested some ideas and helping out with PHP, and that's how we kind of connected. So we connected because I was struggling making something, and he knew how to finish it, and then he redid it too for me. But I had tried a few of these things ahead of time. The software stuff the music collection software worked out really well for me. I mean, I was in high school and college, so like I didn't need to make that much money, but I was making money off of it. And it was wonderful because it showed me that I could make something that I needed, and then other people would be willing to pay for it as well. That if I needed it, someone else out there needed it. And probably a lot of people needed it. It's a big world. So, and if the product is general enough, it's a very, very, very big world. And that was probably what ultimately gave me the confidence to go, I know how to make products that people are going to buy. And so, yeah, I took some swings earlier on, but nothing hit like Basecamp. Nothing still has. Basecamp is still the most successful thing we've ever done. We've done 5 or 6, 7 or 8 products, depending on how you ultimately count them.
Do you ever look at Campfire and say, well, that's just Slack. What the hell? Or are you perfectly happy with Slack's success and your and Campfire being now just part of a bigger ecosystem of Basecamp?
Yeah, I mean, like Slack hit it out of the park. They were. I mean, we were really early, way too early. Campfire launched in 2006. Just really, really, really early. I remember showing Campfire around to people, and just people like not getting like, why would I want to chat with my company? I don't get it. Whatever. So we were early, but also Slack. So Slack came at sort of at the right time, but also beyond that, it's a great product. They did great onboarding. Their onboarding was exceptional, and it was fun, and they had these integrations. So they approached it from a different angle, you know, I haven't talked to Stuart in many years, but Stuart and I knew each other well, and Stuart Butterfield, who started Slack, and he let me know. He's like, hey, we're launching something that's kind of like Campfire. Just wanted to give you a heads up, whatever. So like, you know, so yeah, they did a great job. Obviously, they built a huge, massive business and the whole thing, and good for them. And we've got our own thing, and good for us. And there's plenty of room for a lot of companies to do really, really well. I've come around to the thought that chat is not really a great way to work, though. So I think chat is a piece of the puzzle, but not the primary method of working. I think it's chaotic. It's hard to follow. It makes people feel on edge all the time and anxious. So I'm glad that that's not our primary product and our primary method of communication. It's built into Basecamp 3. Chat and direct messaging is in Basecamp 3, but Basecamp is still primarily built around asynchronous communication, long form writing, letting people think things through before they respond, giving people a chance to think about something before they write it. You know, and writing complete thoughts down rather than thinking one line at a time and chasing a conveyor belt of messages all day. So we have a philosophical difference with Slack, but good for them.
So that brings it up then, right? You write the book on literally on remote work, and everybody's doing it now. It's just a couple of things that everybody says, like you can't build a culture with the remote environment. What's your response to that?
That's wrong. It's a different culture, though. I mean, like, you can build a culture, it's just different. Like, if you're used to hanging out around the lunch table at work, like, no, you can't do that. But that's just what you're used to. It doesn't mean that it's the only way or everything else is bad. You know, we're common, or we're used to what we do all the time. So whatever's common is what we think is the only right way. I think what we've seen over the past year with the pandemic is that a lot of people thought a lot of things were impossible to do. You can't work remotely. You can't work at home. People aren't going to do what they need to do. Like a million different excuses, and all those myths have been busted, which is healthy. It's not that this is easy for a lot of people. Working at home is not easy, especially when you don't have space, or especially if you have kids at home. I think the thing to keep in mind, though, is that this is not even remote working. This is pandemic working, which is going to go away, and also incredibly hard, especially if you have kids. Like, we have 2 young kids, and, you know, remote schooling and no child care. It's like, it's just impossible. It's so hard. But that's not going to be that way forever. So remote working is actually going to get a lot easier for people. And they've actually practiced the hardest way possible, which is kind of nice. It's like going for a jog with like 25-pound ankle weights on, and then getting to take them off and then go for a jog. It's like, this is way easier now. And that's how remote working is going to actually feel for people once the pandemic's behind them. So
yeah, and you know, I think that's true. I have a hard time, but it also means that people have also lost an excuse, right? Of saying we can't do this. We clearly have done it. We've been successful at it. Is there the one thing that you would tell any company that's looking to do this remote work thing besides, you know, use Basecamp and Hey? Like, what is it that is the thing that makes it easier for you guys?
Yeah, first of all, remote work is different. It's not local work. So what people, I think, get wrong a lot is they try to sort of port the way they worked in an office over to the way they work remotely. And they just try to like say, if we had meetings all day before, let's have meetings all day now, you know? Let's just have them on Zoom instead of in person. The thing is, like, Zoom is worse. It's like, it's really mentally taxing. It's exhausting to stare at a camera all day long. And we're having a nice conversation. But if we had to do this for 6 hours every day, like, it's taxing to like literally look at a there's a green light like just pointing in my eyes telling me the camera's on, and like it's you're sitting still. It's not great, you know. It's not a great environment. So remote work's different. It's more about asynchronous work. It's more about giving people time to think things through. It's more about respecting each other's time and attention and space and autonomy. It's a very different mindset, and once you tap into that mindset, you get all sorts of new advantages. If you just try to work the same way you did before, but remotely, it doesn't work as well. It's frustrating. People are going to work longer hours because they're like always on and always connected, and there's always conversations happening, and they're going to feel like they're expected to be part of them all the time. It's just not a healthy way to be. So my suggestion is, whatever tools you decide to use, is fewer meetings, write stuff up instead of have a meeting about it. Meetings should be last resort. Have a conversation. Maybe the conversation takes a couple days to hash something out. We've got lots of conversations going on at Basecamp that take a few days. It's not because we're discussing them for 8 hours straight for a few days. It's just that you write something up, someone gets back to you in an hour, someone else gets back to you in 3 hours, you sleep on it, you have a new idea the next morning, and you just kind of hash things out over time. There's no rush. Take it easy. Of course, some things are urgent. You deal with those as you need to, but most things are not. And it's better to give people time to think things through and write and get back to you when they have a chance, versus feeling like everything needs to be real time right now, on air, the whole thing. So it's a mindset shift more so than a tool shift, although the tools you use do have a huge impact. If you are primarily using Slack, your life is going to suck. Like, you're pretty much just going to be on all day long, real-time conversations constantly, decisions being made that if you're not in the room in that very minute, you don't get to have a say. Like, this is not a healthy pattern. So I do think the tools do matter, but mostly it's still a mindset shift.
Yeah. The asynchronous communication, I mean, and that is a key to it. And I think when it's something you mentioned earlier with your writing on signal versus noise. It was you have always seemed like a proponent of good writing in some way, shape, or form, and good communication in some way, shape, or form. And it seems like as people live in a more remote world, getting back to being able to type out a intelligent and thorough message in whatever the platform is a fairly important thing to kind of grok. The communication in that method is an important part to the remote environment for sure.
It's key, and you've really got to be able to, especially in a remote environment, you have to be able to write. Writing is very important. And you also have to give people time and space. You can't expect and demand immediate responses from people all the time. That's just unhealthy. And you put other people in unhealthy positions when you do that. So it's really a little bit about just like a little bit more trust, a little bit more thinking, a little bit more contemplation before like speaking. Sleeping on it is something we do all the time. Like, just sleep on that. Let's talk about it tomorrow morning, and trusting people are there to do their work, and also encourage them to stop working because it's when your office is your kitchen table and you eat dinner there and you work there and you have breakfast there, it's very easy to put in extra hours of your laptops in your body. You just flip it open and there you are. So remote work is harder in that respect. My suggestion is, if you can, and everybody has the room for this, of course, in their homes, but if you have an extra bedroom or a basement or even a walk-in closet or something where you can just have your own space, that when you go there and you leave there, kind of like a commute, but it's very short, obviously, but it's just something to, versus like working where you live. If you work around the kitchen table, and maybe that's all you have, I get it. But if you work around the kitchen table, work and life mixed together a little bit too much, I think. If I found this to be true when I was way back when I was freelancing at the start of my career. I had just a one bedroom like studio apartment, and I would wake up literally and my desk was next to my bed, And I'd basically be sleeping and working and eating lunch and everything in my bedroom, basically, because that's all I had. And it's tough. It's tough to stop working in those environments. It's not a healthy way to be. Again, if you don't have any other options, you just have to put up with it and deal with it. But if you do have other options, make sure you can carve up some space for yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. I'll ask, see if there's anybody on the old YouTube asking a question.
Okay.
Well, Malcolm, who also shot me an email on hey.com.
Right.
Quickly, before I go to that, what you guys were super focused on Basecamp, and to the point of changing 37 signals to Basecamp and all this other kind of stuff. And then eventually you're like, well, we got another product in us. We're not just going to do Basecamp. What was the key turn right there to kind of figure out let's bring in a new product again and make it something worth it?
For us, it's always the same, which is something just starts to irritate us and bug us. And email is one of those things. We don't communicate using email internally, but we use Basecamp for all of our internal communications. But there's a world outside. We've got vendors and lawyers and attorneys, or accountants, and all sorts of vendors and a server company. You name it. We get. And I get 100 emails a day or whatever, plus or whatever it is, just from people who are asking us questions or whatever. So email is very much part of our lives. And we found ourselves feeling like we were out of control with it, which is the way most people feel about emails. That's not something they control anymore. It used to be that you'd only give your email address out to people you want to hear from. Now your email address has been bought and sold and traded and posted all over the internet. You don't have control over it anymore. So now you can't control who emails you. You can't control if you want to hear from somebody. And Hey is all about giving you your control back. You decide, yes, thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you want to hear from this person ever again? Do I want to let them in my email life, essentially, yes or no? And we're like, I want to do that. I screen my calls. Someone calls me on my phone. I don't know the number. I don't answer it. Why can't I do that with email? Why can't? And so we started putting together these things, and there's like 25 or so of them that really, really frustrated us about email, that we go, we can fix these things. These aren't insurmountable at all. It just takes a new type of thinking, a new point of view. And that point of view is never going to come from entrenched players. The last time email was interesting was 16 years ago when Google launched Gmail. It's been 16 years, and Gmail's changed and gotten better. It's a great product in a lot of ways, but it hasn't really fundamentally gotten better in new ways of thinking about email. And so it was time for us to do that. And we had ideas. And then once you have these ideas in your head and you want to use this product for yourself, you can't get them out of your head. It's time to make it. And then you start making it and see where it goes. And initially started out as a business only product. Then we kind of shifted it over to a personal start, and then business after that. And we're about to launch the business version to the public soon. And so we'll see. Now we'll have two products again, Basecamp and Hey, and we'll see how that goes.
And nobody raised their hand and said, hey, why are we doing this? I thought we were supposed to be laser focused on Basecamp. Was there ever pushback from the company on that, or is it just like,
yeah. No, there was, and there always is. And it's just one of those things where, I get it. It's true. There are things, but you have to at some point make the pitch that we're doing this because we think it's worth it, even though there's trade-offs, and there definitely are trade-offs. But you just kind of go with it, and you do what you can, and you make a bet. This is all about, our whole thing is it's all about bets. You're just making bets. There's no certainty. There's no way that you're going to know exactly what's going to work and what isn't going to work. You just kind of have to believe enough and control your downside risk enough. If Hey hadn't worked, this is very similar to Basecamp when we built Basecamp. Basecamp is buoying the business. Basecamp is paying for the business. If Hey doesn't work, that's okay. We still have Basecamp. Just like if Basecamp didn't work, we still would have had the consulting business. It's a similar thing. So we're taking the same approach.
So before I got distracted, Malcolm, thank you for the question. The question was around, you said this is pandemic work. What do you see remote work or just work in general look like in 2 years after, say, knock on some kind of wood, that the pandemic is over in 2 years kind of thing?
I think we're going to see pretty much a hybrid style. I think more people are going to be able to work at home than could ever work at home before. I think some people are going to want to go back to the office for sure. I think that though those who go back to the office will have more flexibility, which I think is always a good thing. I think we're going to see office design change. I think we're going to see smaller offices, less square footage, maybe less money spent on wild offices. But then again, like there's going to be, like anything, like people will get bigger offices again at some point, and people will spend money on offices again at some point, because some people will really want to have an office and people will be sick of working at home. So it's just like it's a pendulum. But the most important thing, I think, is that flexibility has been introduced into work life for millions of people. Myths have been busted. Managers have no excuse anymore. They can't say, well, I can only manage people if I can see them. No, not so true. Like these are all improvements. So however the world settles back in, I think it's gonna be a more flexible world, more trust, fewer myths. And these are, I think, really, really good things. However it shakes out for individual companies is up to the individual company.
Y'all had a nice office for a while. What was the decision behind that when you were so pro remote work, and you have closed that up, right? As no longer
Yeah, we had a 10-year lease, and it ended in June or July this year, and we didn't renew. We weren't going to renew anyway. The pandemic made it easier not to renew, but we'd already, long before that, decided not to renew. The office was a luxury spend. We'd had offices before, but we'd always subletted space from another company. So we bought like 5 or 6 desks from someone else. This was our chance to indulge and build something in our own vision, in our own mind, what we wanted. We waited 10 years into our business before we could afford to do it, before we decided to do it. And we knew it was a luxury. It was unnecessary to go all out the way we did. It was unnecessary to have as much space as we did, but we're okay with it. We're fine with it. We enjoyed it thoroughly. It was a wonderful, wonderful office. I loved working there. A lot of people did, but it was time for it to go. Rent in the area. We got into this area in Chicago, which was really not a desirable area. And by the time 10 years later, it's the most desirable area in the entire city. So rent was going to go up 2 or 3 or 4x, depending on where you were. It's like, it's just not worth it for us anymore. So we don't have an office, and we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll never have an office again. Maybe we'll decide in 2 years to have another office. And if we do, it'll likely be more of a social space, less dedicated desks for people, but maybe more shared workspaces, shared tables, more of like almost more like a civic meeting hall kind of feel versus a like traditional office space. Even though our office was not a traditional space, our office was more like a library. It was very quiet. We treat it like a library, not like an office. It was a place to learn, a place to think, a place to contemplate, a place to be quiet and have your own space and not be bothered, which is not typically what offices are all about. So we'd probably double down even further on that, but probably just make it smaller and make it more communal even as well. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. And we get to save, $250,000 a year minimum. It would have been more. It would, save $300,000 or $400,000 a year easy on rent, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that's a person if you want.
It's a real number, real number. So yeah.
Evan, who was the guy who introduced me to 37 Signals all these years ago, I asked him what his one question would be, and he said, is there a big or small thing over time that you were very confident that you're fundamentally wrong on from the business side of things? Was there a miss that you couldn't believe you missed on?
I don't really think that way, but I would say that I think we probably should have had someone in like people ops or HR earlier than we ultimately did. We've had someone in that role now for 3+ years. I think it's been three years now or so. And we probably should have had someone in that role sooner. And I think it's probably like, it's easy just to think like things are fine. Everyone's going to work their own issues out and whatever. But people do need someone to talk to that's not me or David. They can't go to the owner of the business and talk to the owner of the, you can, but most people don't and wouldn't, because it's inherently it's seen as risky and you don't want to say things, whatever, you get it. So I think we should have had someone in that role sooner. and I'm glad that we have someone in that role now. So I think that was something that we probably, I don't really see it as like a mistake though. It's just like, it was a bit of a learning curve, and now we know. So I don't really like labeling things as mistakes. I mean, there are mistakes you make in life, like literal, for real mistakes, and I've made plenty. But I don't like to think of a lot of business things like that, because I think that you do the best you can at the time and with the information that you have. And it's easy to look back and go, I wish I would have done this, but like you didn't have that information. So like you probably would have made the same decision back then again, just because you didn't have the information you have now. So it's easy to look back and look at things and find mistakes and think things are mistakes because of what you know today, but you didn't know those things back then. So maybe they were the right decision, even though they didn't work out. It might've been the better decision. You could have done something else that could have worked out even worse. So it's hard to know. And I just tend not to reflect on things in that way.
Is there if you were to add a usability improvement to the modern car, what would it be? If you had a chance to get and change a car in one way, what would it be?
A car.
Yeah.
Good question. I don't know. That's a really, I mean, it's hard to say, because there have been a number of things that, like, for example, like having to go get an oil change every 2,000 miles is really irritating. But electric cars don't have oil changes, so that's nice. So it kind of depends on it's hard to answer that broadly, let's say. I would say though, primarily it's parking. So it's not the car. It's when you get there, you don't know if you can stay there. It's kind of like, now in some towns it never matters, but like in Chicago, like I won't drive downtown because like I don't know if I can find a place to park. It's not that I don't like driving. It's like I don't like parking. I don't know where. So it's that part of it that is sort of the big unknown for me with cars.
Yeah. No.
Traffic, like that kind of, like I don't like the unknowns. I like I'd love to go for a great drive. Oh, you get stuck behind someone who's going 15 miles an hour, and it's like that's just. So it's that kind of stuff. But I would say that historically, though, car design, primarily interior, the exteriors of cars have been pretty nice for a while, but I think the interiors only recently kind of got nice. And I think it's a lot about materiality. One of the things that bugs me about car interiors is like fake materials. So you have like vinyl that's like pressed to look like leather, or something that's added grain. And it's just like, there's a sort of a lack of integrity in it. It's almost like it's trying to fool you. It's like getting an envelope that has fake handwriting as the address to make you think that someone wrote that address. It's all manipulation, and I just I'm not into that. So like if you're gonna have a vinyl dashboard because that's the price point of the car, that's fine. Like that's what it is. Like make it that, versus try to make it like faux leather. And you see a lot of buttons, like even in high-end cars, like that like look like they're chrome or metal, but they're plastic, that have been like painted chrome or something. I don't like the artificiality of that. So like if you can't make the budget work with a chrome button or a metal button, then don't make it look like metal. Make it a plastic button. Plastic buttons are perfectly adequate. Don't fake it. I think that's the one thing I would maybe try to change, even though this probably doesn't matter, but it's one of those things that bugs me.
No, I get it. How about interface design on the web? What's the thing that's the trend of 2021 that drives you crazy, or that you would want to see a different way about for the use of kind of modern web?
There's a lot of, and this is probably the way it's always been, but there's a lot of Me Too designs right now. There's just a lot of people plugging in templates and then filling in spaces, versus thinking first about what do I want to communicate? Like what is the site about? Not like how do I fill in a template, but what do I want to say? And starting there. And I think we'd have better websites if people started with the writing first versus the design first. So it's not so much a design critique as it is a starting point critique. I think the web would be a better place. Most websites would be better off if they were written out and people thought about what they wanted to communicate first, versus filling in boxes. Like I've got these 3 stacked things. I need to put one feature here on this side and this side. And so I have 6 features to to highlight. It's like people I don't think are thinking enough. So I'd love to see a little bit more custom design too, and just really thinking about what you want to say in smaller websites. Some websites are too big. I mean, one-page sites are amazing, if possible, 1 or 3 pages or something. So it's just shorter, smaller. One of my favorite websites remains, there's 2, Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett's company, which is one of the most successful business or investing firms ever. If you look at Berkshire Hathaway's website, it looks like it was designed in 1996, and it may have been. It's 2 columns of bullet-pointed text, blue text or something on white. It's perfect. It's all it needs to be. It's all there, 100% clear, all there. There's even like a link, I think, to like Webmaster at the bottom or something, like Webmaster's email address or some silly like that, or web is in all caps or some like really archaic thing, but like it's perfectly adequate and there's nothing wrong with it, and you could only make it worse in a lot of ways. And the other one is the Drudge Report, which is another site that's just like black and white, 3 columns of text, all about headlines. It's chaotic, it's spontaneous, you can't find things, but that's the whole point. And it stood the test of time. It's updatable by one person. There's something special about it compared to every other news site. You go to like, MSNBC and CNBC and CNN and Fox News and NBC News and like all these different Washington Post and like you go to all the New York Times, like all these other news sites kind of look like news. They all kind of sort of look the same. I mean, certain ones definitely, like New York Times definitely has a distinct look that mimics the newspaper. But most of these sites and most local news sites, they all follow the same template. They all look basically the same. You can replace the logo and it's kind of the same thing. Meanwhile, like you go to the Drudge Report and it's just like, it's a totally different approach. And it's super lo-fi and super fast because it's just text. And it works so well because that's all it is. And it's all it's ever meant to be. And the only thing you could do is make it worse by making it designery or whatever. So I like things that are just stripped back that way and honest.
Yeah.
Forgetting the content on the sites, but like the honesty of the design, like this is what it is. I like that.
Well, we're going to have to we're going to stop it there before I turn to old man Adam and just agree with you so much on web design and templates and writing. So I appreciate the time.
This was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And
sorry I was 10 minutes late getting started, but thanks.